Continuing with our series of preparing for Pesach. So as we all know, we start the Seder. One of the first things we start with the Seder, and the focal point for many of the children, is the Manishtana. And we start with the 4 questions, the 4 kashas. And I remember growing up that a 5th kasha struck me right from the beginning of the Seder. Right when we start the Seder, one of the first things that we do, and the first mitzvah that we actively engage in, is Kiddish. And it always struck me that why is Kiddish so different Pesach night from all nights of the year? And that was a Manishtana question that always struck me as being so curious. Why is Kiddish different on Pesach? Now, how is Kiddish different on Pesach than the whole year? Well, because the whole year when we make Kiddish on Shabbos and Yontiv, the head of the family, he has the kais, he has the becher, he makes Kiddish, everybody listens, and they all take a little taste of the Kiddish. And on Seder night, everybody has their own kais, and even women and children. Now, why is that on Pesach that everybody has their own kais? And why is it that the whole year on Kiddish is that everybody takes just a sip, and even the balabayas, he takes a mouthful? On Pesach night, on Seder night, there's a din of roiv kais, that we all drink at least roiv kais. Well, really, in fact, this is a subject of discussion amongst the Rishonim. Now, we paskin lahalacha that is the case, and that everybody has their own kais, and we drink a roiv kais. And it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah, and it's based on the Rambam. However, the first Taisus in Arei Pesachim, at the beginning of Arei Pesachim, Taisus says that afilu ani shebi Yisrael lo yivchas lo mi arba kaises. Even a very poor person, we have to ensure that he has dalit kaises. It says lo yivchas loy mi dalit kaises. We don't give him less than 4 kaises. So Taisus is mashma. He says that we only have to give for him. We don't have to give the dalit kaises to every member of the family. So there's a diyan in the Poskim, the Taisus, and the Rosh, but as mentioned, lahalacha, we paskin based on other Rishonim, not like that. And as the Maral explains, that drinking the kais on Pesach night is like eating matzah, it's like eating mar. It's not just saying Kiddish on the kais. It's actually drinking the wine is part of the mitzvah. As Rav Chaim explains in the Rambam, that the mitzvah of Kiddush on Pesach night is not just Amira saying the bracha on a kais, which is the whole year. We say a bracha on the kais, and of course we take a drink from it once we say the bracha, but the ikar of Kiddush is to be Mekadesh, to show the chashivas of the day, how special Shabbos is, how special Yontiv is. So we say the bracha. The ikar is to say the bracha. But on Seder night, we also have to drink from it. The ikar part of the mitzvah is actually drinking the wine. And part of the yesod, fundamental concept over here, is that we have to view ourselves as if we're going out of Mitzrayim. And actually, we have this concept that Chai Varam Liris as Atzmai Ki Ilu Hu Yatzim Mitzrayim. We actually see this concept in the Haggadah twice. At the beginning of the Haggadah, and towards the end, immediately prior to us being Mekayim the mitzvah of the Kaisheni and the Matzah and the Mar. After the 4 questions, we give the answer. The teretz is Avodim Hayun al Param Mitzrayim. V'ilu loy hoitziano, if Hashem, the Rabbeinu Shalom, if He had not taken us out of Mitzrayim, hayanu vanenu uvnei vanenu mishubadim hayinu leparam Mitzrayim, we would still be slaves to Param Mitzrayim. And he explains the Ritva, the Shabbat Leket, that this is a fundamental concept of the Seder, since we would all have been slaves to Paro and Mitzrayim, then we have to view ourselves as that we are coming out of Mitzrayim, because we too have a Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because if it hadn't been for the Geula from Mitzrayim, then we would have been slaves. So this is our Geula as well. This is our redemption as well. It's not only theirs, this is our freedom. This is our Cheres. Now, we say, towards the end of the Haggadah, before the Kiyum Mitzvahs, that Chayav Adam Liras Es Atzmai Kiluhu Yotzim Mitzrayim. We also mention this concept, that a person has to view himself, B'chol Dor V'Dor, we have to view ourselves that we have gone out, we are having our Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the question arises, and several Meforshim ask the question, why the repetition? Why do we seem to mention this concept? We seem to be mentioning it twice. At the beginning of the Haggadah and before the Kiyum of the Mitzvahs. So why are we mentioning this concept twice, that we have to view ourselves like we're coming out of Mitzrayim? Perhaps the explanation is that there are really two concepts here. One concept is that when we start the Seder, we have to give Shevach V'Haidot to Rebbeinu Shalom. We're going to now expound on the Nisim, on all the miracles. We're going to say the Haggadah, and we're going to talk about the wonderful Nisim, the great Nisim, that the Rebbeinu Shalom, what he did for us, his Yana Chazaka, his Raya Netuya. So we show that from a place of Hakaras HaTov. We want to give Shevach V'Haidot to the Rebbeinu Shalom and talk about the great Nisim. So we immediately start the Haggadah that if not for Yetzias Mitzrayim, Haray Anu Vanenu V'nei Vanenu, we would be Meshubarim L'Para Mitzrayim. So we have this unbelievable Hakaras HaTov. We have such Hakaras HaTov, Shevach V'Haidot to Rebbeinu Shalom. We're going to talk about all these Nisim. We're going to tell over all these great miracles, and we're going to tell it over with our own Shevach V'Haidot and gratitude to Hashem, because we have gone out of Mitzrayim as well. But there's another concept. There's another aspect of it. There's another aspect of it is that we have to know this intellectually, but not only intellectually. We have to feel it. We have to experience it emotionally. We have to have the experience of that simcha, that we are coming out of Mitzrayim. We eat the matzah. We eat the more. We taste the bitter more. We experience the shibud. We eat the matzah, b'chipozan, that we ran out of Mitzrayim. And we drink the wine of Cheres. Because there's an element over here of Yetzias Mitzrayim that when we Seder night, we have to experience, we have to feel it, mumka deliva, and experience that simcha. And that feeling of Mishiba L'Geula, and that feeling of Cheres. And we have to feel that internally, internalize it, and feel it on an emotional level. And really, it's inherent in two girsoyas. Chayvanam liris es atzma ki ilu yotzam mitzrayim, and another girsa is chayvanam laharis es atzma. He has to demonstrate, he has to show, he has to also have to view himself as coming out of Mitzrayim. And this is part of the avodah of Seder night. This is part of the great avodah of Seder night, to understand intellectually that we were redeemed from Mitzrayim, and talk about the great Nisim, and discuss and talk about the Nisim and elaborate on these miracles with the understanding that these miracles were done for us. They were done for us, and we have such hakaras HaTov to the Rebbeinu Shalom, Shevach V'Haidot, and we talk about the great Nisim of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and the gratitude that we have, the Shevach V'Haidot to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And there's the element of experiencing, and on an emotional level, that we are going out of Mitzrayim. And on Seder night, we're going out of Mitzrayim, because we have the ability on Seder night to achieve a level of Cheres, a level of freedom, a freedom from our own personal shibud, whatever it may be, not only on a national level, on a personal level, to rise above the bondage, the chains that tie us down, the chains that tie us to the Olam Agashmi, to Olam Hazeh, to the Olam Atuma. There was a Tumas Mitzrayim, and there's a Tuma in the Golus. And to be able to rise above it, and to rise above our own limitations, and experience a true Cherus. And Seder night is a time when we talk about the Sinisim of Mitzrayim. Seder night is a time we talk about the great miracles of Mitzrayim, the great miracles that the Rebbeinu Shalom did for Klal Yisrael throughout the Deiros. And there's a time, Seder night, where mishpachas, families, and people recount their own nisim, Shevach Haidah to the Rebbeinu Shalom on their own personal redemption. And as a child of Holocaust survivors, my parents or survivors, my in-laws, my wife's parents, Holocaust survivors, Seder night was always a time. Seder night was always a time when they talked about their experiences. They talked about the bitter shibud in the camps. They talked about the bondage, the slavery, the torture of the camps, and they talked about the redemption. My mother, Alav Shalom, used to regularly tell us her Pesach story. Her Pesach story with her redemption from the bondage, from the shibud, from the slavery of the camps. She was first taken to Auschwitz, and after Auschwitz, she was brought to a labor camp, Allendorf. And she was there in Allendorf, and she had the good fortune to be there with one of her sisters and a couple of her cousins. And that gave them the great chizuk to survive the camps, to survive the war, that they had each other. Came Pesach. They were in Allendorf. And these young girls, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls, came Pesach. And they could not fathom eating chametz on Pesach. How can they put bread in their mouth? It's not possible. It's impossible to put bread in their mouth. It just couldn't be done. Now, all they subsided on was some water that they called soup and a piece of bread. And that's all they had to sustain themselves. So how could they not eat the bread? Furthermore, if the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, found out that they were not eating the bread, they would beat them mercilessly. So what were they to do? These girls decided that they were not going to have chametz on Pesach. They just could not have chametz on Pesach. So what they did is they took the bread that they were given, they hid it in their mattresses. And they searched around and they found some potato peels, and they sustained themselves with these potato peels. Shortly after Pesach in 1945, they were ordered out of the camp. And they were ordered on the infamous death march. The death marches where they marched the prisoners, they marched them on the roads without food, without water, walking, marching, and people died from hunger and starvation and exhaustion, falling on the roads. And they marched, and they marched, and they marched. And finally, they came to a road outside a very small town called Niedergrinsbach, which was about 100 kilometers from Feldafing. And there the Nazis, Yamach Shem, left them. They abandoned them on the road. And there my mother collapsed. But she survived. And one of the reasons that she survived was because when they were ordered out of the camp, when they were ordered out of Allendorf, they had the presence of mind to search and grab that bread from under their mattresses, that bread that they would not eat on Pesach, and that's what sustained them and saved them through this terrible death march. Everybody has their own redemption. Everybody has their own shibud. Everybody has their own bondage. And everybody has the ability for their own redemption. And Pesach night is a night that we experience. We talk about the Nisim. We have our Koras HaTov for the Nisim. We experience Mishibud L'Geula with hearts Molei Simcha, yearning for the Rabbeinu Shalom to redeem us.